Imagine the person you love most, the one you promised to protect, suddenly becomes the greatest threat to your child. My wife seemed perfect, until a toxic online group twisted her mind, leading her to kidnap our son to save him from men like me. This is the insane true story of how I fought to get him back and the years it took to heal from her ultimate betrayal. You won't believe how it ends. When I first met Chloe, she was, like, legit perfect. Or so my 20-something brain, high on new relationship energy, decided. First date, driving her home, I put on this indie track I was obsessed with, you know, deep cuts, emotional lyrics, the whole vibe. She kinda scrunched her nose, not really my tempo. Fair enough. But then I was like, no, but listen to the synth melody under the vocals, it's iconic. 20 seconds later, she's nodding, okay, yeah, I get it. It's actually pretty fire. And just like that, a switch flipped in my head. Not in a creepy way, but I saw her as super receptive, someone who could, like, genuinely consider another perspective. Feminine, yeah, but more like, open. I felt this huge urge to, I dunno, shield her from all the internet trolls and bad takes. Spoiler, nothing could shield her from the algorithm that eventually led her to the EmpowerFlow Collective. Look, I used to be all for online communities that hyped each other up. Real sisterhood, support, all that good stuff. But this EmpowerFlow thing? It started popping up on Chloe's feed, then her For You page was basically a shrine to their founder, this influencer named Serafina Moon. At first, it seemed harmless, affirmations, self-care tips, manifest your best life, content. But then Chloe started going to their local meetups, hosted at this bougie wellness studio near her co-working space. I even went to one, guest-friendly, brunch with them. Worst decision ever. These weren't just a supportive friend group, they were like professional outrage farmers. Their entire brand was being perpetually offended by everything. I held the door open at the cafe, basic manners, right? One of them, with these intense acrylics, literally side-eyed me and muttered something about performative chivalry undermining female agency. Okay, sure. Then when the bill came, I offered to cover it. It was my treat, I invited them. The one next to me, who'd been doom-scrolling on her phone the whole time, gives my arm this little passive-aggressive pat. Sweetie, we're all empowered girl bosses here. We can contribute. Cool, I thought, progressive. So I'm like, awesome, my Zelle is just my number if anyone wants to chip in. Crickets. Absolute silence. The audacity. You could have heard a pin drop, except for the sound of them all suddenly really interested in their matcha lattes. That brunch was a total vibe check, and it failed spectacularly. It was after that disastrous meal that all the little weird arguments Chloe and I had been having started to make a horrifying kind of sense. Up until then, it was like trying to debate a sentient Twitter thread. If I left, say, a single pair of socks on the bedroom floor, my bad, I'm not perfect, she'd somehow connect it to global gender inequality. This, she'd say, pointing at the socks with the dramatic flair of a Shakespearean actor, is exactly why the pay gap persists. It's the ingrained disrespect. Bro, what? Or if she was on AUX in the car and I asked to cue up a song, suddenly I was exhibiting classic male entitlement, making everything about my sonic preferences. It got so out of pocket, I genuinely asked her if she needed to take a pregnancy test because her moods were wilder than a crypto bro's portfolio. Negative. Big surprise. I knew, deep down, it wasn't hormones. It was them. Her new, soul sisters, from EmpowerFlow, feeding her this stream of toxic positivity mixed with weaponized buzzwords, and it was poisoning our relationship, bite by bite. Look, if you know anything about me, it's that I don't give up easy. Especially not on something as important as my marriage. And it wasn't just about me and Chloe anymore. My son, Ian, from a previous relationship, was only 5, but he'd gotten super attached to Chloe. He called her Mama Chloe and drew her these little crayon pictures that she used to stick on the fridge. The thought of him losing another mother figure? Nah, I couldn't let that happen. He deserved stability. So, I went into full fix-it mode. Operation Save my marriage from the clutches of questionable internet gurus. First, I tried the subtle approach, what I thought was manipulation, but really, it was just, like, positive peer pressure. I invited Chloe to hang out with my friends, guys and girls who genuinely respected each other, who could have a normal conversation without turning it into a gender studies dissertation. My thinking was, if she saw healthy dynamics, maybe she'd realize how off-kilter her EmpowerFlow crew was. Total fail. She spent the whole evening fact-checking everyone's problematic language and live-tweeting about the microaggressions in my friend Dave's knock-knock jokes. Dave was just trying to be funny, bless his heart. Next up, the love bombing phase, though I didn't call it that then. I just thought, okay, maybe she feels unappreciated. So, for weeks, it was all out. Expensive date nights at those trendy rooftop places she saw on IG, surprise weekend getaways to those aesthetic boutique hotels, even decking out our bedroom with those giant, over-the-top Valentine's Day balloon displays, multiple times, just because. I was basically trying to outromance her influencer feed. But it was like pouring water into a sieve. She'd accept the gifts, post the curated pics, #blessed, #self-love journey, but her behavior didn't change. No thank yous, no softening. Just this air of, well, this is the absolute bare minimum, and frankly, I deserve more for the emotional labor of existing in your presence. Ouch. My final, desperate play? I tried to become her. Mirroring, you know. I started listening to her playlists, which had morphed from chill indie to these super aggressive hyperpop tracks with lyrics that were basically just strings of profanity and vaguely threatening affirmations. I tried to adopt her unbothered persona, even got my nails done with clear gel polish once because she said it was gender-neutral chic. I was so far out of my depth, I needed a snorkel. Just when I thought, okay, maybe this performative wokeness is actually bridging the gap, I came home one afternoon to the sound of Ian sobbing. Gut punch. He was in his room, hysterical. Chloe was downstairs, scrolling on her tablet, noise-canceling headphones on, completely oblivious, or pretending to be. It just didn't compute. I rushed upstairs. Ian was a mess. I held him, did our little breathing exercises we always did when he got overwhelmed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, like blowing out birthday candles. He eventually calmed down enough to stop hyperventilating, and then, he just started taking off his clothes. All of them. And what I saw underneath made my stomach turn, like I'd chugged a gallon of expired milk. His tiny arms, his legs, his chest, they were covered in these awful, angry red marks. Bruises. One, on his shoulder, was shaped unmistakably like an adult handprint. My vision tunneled. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. I thought the worst was over, but when I confronted Chloe, her reaction was more chilling than the injuries themselves. What she said next would make me question everything I thought I knew about the woman I married, and it was only the beginning of the nightmare. I didn't say a word to Ian. Just scooped up his discarded clothes, found his softest pajamas, and gently dressed him, my hands shaking so bad I could barely fasten the buttons. Then, I bundled him into the car and drove straight to my sister's place. She took one look at his face, then at mine, and knew something was terribly wrong. I didn't have to explain much. She just took Ian, promised to keep him safe, and told me to handle whatever I needed to. When I got back to our apartment, the rage I'd been suppressing felt like a physical thing, a burning pressure in my chest. Chloe was still downstairs, same spot on the couch, tablet still glowing. The casualness of it, the sheer disconnect, was what broke me. For the first time in our entire relationship, I screamed. Not just raised my voice, I full-on yelled, "Was that you? Did you do that to him?" She peeled off her headphones, blinked at me like I was an annoying pop-up ad, and then, she actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go," she said, her voice dripping with that condescending EmpowerFlow tone. Fragile masculinity on full display. Man raises voice because his ego is bruised. Classic. "Don't you dare," I seethed, "don't you dare turn this into one of your woke talking points. Did you lay a single hand on Ian?" For a split second, she looked shocked that I'd actually pushed back, that I wasn't just absorbing her psychobabble. Then, the mask slammed back into place. "You should be thanking me," she said, her voice chillingly calm. "I'm ensuring he doesn't perpetuate the cycle. I'm teaching him accountability. He needs to understand that his actions have consequences, even at his age. He needs to learn not to become another entitled, toxic man like the rest of them. I stopped listening after thanking me. The world went red. If she hadn't been a woman, if there wasn't that tiny, civilized part of my brain still clinging to control, I don't know what I would have done. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her justification, it was monstrous. Instead, I took a ragged breath, the air feeling like sandpaper in my lungs. "We're done," I choked out. "We are so effing done." Then I walked out, got back in my car, and drove to my sister's, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the image of those marks on Ian's skin burned into my retinas. I figured, okay, divorce. Messy, expensive, emotionally draining, but then it would be over. I'd get Ian, she'd get whatever twisted validation her EmpowerFlow cult buddies gave her. I'd never have to see her or her toxic positivity again. I was so wrong. Because a few weeks later, while I was at work, trying to pretend my life wasn't imploding, Chloe and her circle, probably the same ones from that disastrous brunch, broke into my sister's house. I got the security alert on my phone, saw the frantic missed calls from my sister. I called the police, flooring it all the way there, but I knew. I just knew. By the time I skidded into the driveway, the cops were already there. And Ian was gone. My son was kidnapped by my ex-wife and her cult-like friends. The police were involved, an Amber Alert was out, but every lead seemed to go cold. Just when I was about to lose all hope, a clue surfaced from the most unexpected place, but would it be enough to find Ian before it was too late? The digital breadcrumbs. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel, let alone articulate a coherent thought when the first officer approached me at my sister's house. The scene was chaotic, cruisers parked haphazardly, neighbors gawking, my sister sobbing on her porch. I stumbled out of my car, the world tilting. I tried to explain everything, Chloe's escalating extremism, the injuries I'd found on Ian, taking him to my sister's for safety, the security alert, them disappearing. The officer took notes, his face growing grimmer with every detail. Inside, the guest room where Ian had been staying was a mess. The back door had been jimmied open, the lock mangled. His favorite dinosaur plushie lay face down on the floor. The detective assigned to the case, a guy named Miller, was all business. He asked about Chloe's friends, their routines, any known hangouts. I told him about EmpowerFlow, Serafina Moon, their almost religious devotion to this warped ideology of saving boys from toxic masculinity. He nodded, writing it all down, his expression unreadable. An Amber Alert blared across every phone in the state within the hour. Ian's school photo, that goofy, gap-toothed grin he had, flashed on my screen. 5 years old, brown hair, hazel eyes, last seen wearing his favorite blue dinosaur t-shirt. Seeing his face, knowing he was out there, scared and with her, it was a new level of hell. The next few hours were a blur of the police station, providing names, addresses, social media handles of Chloe's EmpowerFlow crew. Detective Miller assured me they were pulling out all the stops. But when I left, the exhaustion was bone deep, yet sleep was impossible. I drove to Chloe's old co-working space, hoping someone there might know something. The receptionist, who used to be friendly, gave me an icy stare. Chloe had taken an indefinite personal leave 2 days prior. No explanation. When I asked about her EmpowerFlow friends, the receptionist's lips thinned. Those women, she said, were intense. Understatement of the year. Chloe's phone went straight to voicemail. Her parents claimed they hadn't heard from her. Her sister, who I always thought was the reasonable one, hung up on me. Dead end after dead end. Back at my sister's, I just sat in Ian's ransacked room, staring at his scattered toys. The breathing exercises we always did felt like a cruel joke. He needed them now more than ever, and I wasn't there to guide him through them. Then, a small blip. Detective Miller called. They tracked a withdrawal from Chloe's bank card at an ATM 3 towns over. Security footage showed her alone, disguised in a baseball cap and sunglasses. No Ian. No friends. The trail went cold again. I couldn't just sit there. I logged onto social media, my fingers flying, digging through the profiles of her EmpowerFlow friends. Most were locked down tighter than Fort Knox, all vague inspirational quotes and filtered selfies. But one of them, a woman whose online persona was Luna Bloom Warrior, had recently posted a photo dump. A wellness retreat. Mostly yoga poses and artisanal smoothie bowls, but in the background of one shot, almost hidden behind a "Live Laugh Love" sign, was a distinctive landmark, a dilapidated red barn with a unique weather vane. Mountains loomed behind it. It wasn't local. I screenshotted everything, my heart hammering, and immediately sent it to Miller. He said they'd investigate but warned me, sternly, not to play vigilante. Easier said than done when your kid is missing. The red barn photo was a lead, but the cabin was empty when police arrived. Just as I was about to lose it, new, unexpected call came in, a former member of EmpowerFlow, ready to talk. What secrets would she reveal, and could her information finally lead me to Ian? That night was the longest of my life. Sleep was a distant rumor. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, had me jolting upright. I replayed every interaction with Chloe, every red flag I'd missed or dismissed, tormenting myself. The next morning, Miller called. The cabin from Luna Bloom Warrior's photos? Empty. Fresh tire tracks, though. They'd left recently, probably spooked. My hope, which had flared so briefly, nosedived. I couldn't stay put. I started visiting places Chloe and her EmpowerFlow crew used to frequent, the organic grocery store where she'd first encountered their toxic vibes, the yoga studio where they'd held their sacred circle meetings, the artisanal coffee shop that served as their unofficial HQ. At the coffee shop, a young barista, who I vaguely remembered from picking Chloe up once, recognized me. When I, probably looking like a sleep-deprived maniac, explained the Amber Alert and showed her Ian's photo, her eyes went wide. "They were in here yesterday morning," she whispered, glancing around. That whole group. Huddled in the corner, super intense. They were talking about protecting the future and necessary sacrifices. My blood ran cold. One of them, the barista added, paid with a card. Catherine Williams. I remembered because my aunt's name is Catherine. I relayed this to Miller immediately. Catherine Williams. It was a solid name, a concrete lead. An hour later, he called back, his voice tight with controlled excitement. Catherine Williams rented a property 2 hours north. Rural. Paid cash for a month up front. We're mobilizing. He reiterated, very firmly, that I was to stay put. Let them handle it. Yeah, right. My kid was out there. As I drove, not even sure where I was going, just needing to do something, my phone rang. Unknown number. My heart leaped. Hello? It was a woman's voice, hesitant. Is this Ian's father? She introduced herself as Victoria Chen. The name didn't ring a bell, until she explained. She'd been part of EmpowerFlow. Had seen the Amber Alert. She'd quietly distanced herself months ago when their rhetoric got too extreme, when empowerment started sounding a lot like indoctrination. They talked about it, Victoria said, her voice trembling. A re-education retreat. For young boys. To cleanse them of societal corruption before it took root. One of them, Sarah Jane, has a family farmhouse, super remote. Near a tiny town called Millbrook. They thought it was the perfect place. She didn't know the exact address, but Millbrook, it was another piece of the puzzle. I thanked her, my voice hoarse with emotion, and immediately updated Miller. He sounded surprised I was still getting leads but took the information. The net felt like it was finally, slowly, closing. That evening, waiting for news, was torture. Then Miller called, around 9 p.m. They'd found the rental property Catherine Williams had secured. Empty again. But they found kids' clothes, toy wrappers, evidence Ian had been there. They'd likely been tipped off or spooked. He promised they were widening the search, incorporating the Millbrook lead. But I couldn't just wait. Millbrook. That was the new target. I drove there myself, against police orders, and a chance encounter at a closed diner gave me the final clue I needed. I found the farmhouse, and I saw Ian. But what happened next, as police closed in, would be a fight for more than just his freedom. Millbrook was one of those blink-and-you'll-miss-it towns. One main street, a gas station, a diner. I showed Ian's photo at the gas station, no luck. The diner was closed, but an older woman was locking up. I practically begged her, showing her the Amber Alert on my phone. Her face softened. A group of women came in this morning, she said. Ordered a bunch of food to go. One had a little boy with her. My heart leaped. He was quiet, she added, real subdued. One of them mentioned they were staying at the old Hendricks place, out on the county line. She didn't know exactly where it was. I called Miller immediately, relayed the new info. He was not happy I was in Millbrook but took the details. Units are en route to the area, but stay away, he ordered. I agreed, then promptly started driving the back roads, scanning for anything resembling an old farmhouse, looking for that distinctive red barn from Luna Bloom Warrior's photo. And then, I saw it. A flash of faded red through a thicket of trees. The same weather vane. My pulse went into overdrive. I pulled over, trying to think, trying not to just sprint towards it. As I reached for my phone to call Miller with the exact location, I saw movement. A small figure in a familiar blue dinosaur t-shirt, being led by a woman from the barn towards the main house. Ian. He was right there. Maybe 300 yards away. I fumbled the call to Miller, spitting out GPS coordinates, descriptions, everything. Units are 20 minutes out, maybe less. Do not approach. Stay in your car. That is an order. I stammered an agreement, every cell in my body screaming to run to my son. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched the farmhouse, counted 4 cars. They were all there, Chloe and her EmpowerFlow disciples. Then, sirens. Distant at first, then closer, louder. Police cruisers swarmed the property, lights flashing, surrounding it. Officers, tactical gear, a bullhorn demanding they come out. I stayed by my car, shaking, my eyes glued to the house. Shouting from inside. Figures trying to scatter out the back, quickly apprehended. Then, an officer emerged from the front door, carrying a small, limp figure. The dinosaur shirt. I didn't even realize I was running until I was halfway across the yard. The officer saw me, recognized me. Ian was in my arms, clinging to me, a torrent of silent sobs racking his small body. I held him, rocking him, whispering our breathing exercises, in for the good air, out for the scared air, until his sobs quieted into shuddering breaths. Detective Miller appeared, his face grim. We got them all, he said. 5 women, including your ex-wife. They weren't expecting us this quick. He mentioned they'd found notebooks, lesson plans, for re-educating young boys, lists of other, at-risk, children they were monitoring. The local DA was going to have a field day. My first stop was the hospital. Ian needed to be checked, head to toe. The ER was a blur of gentle nurses and probing questions. Ian wouldn't let go of my hand, burying his face in my side whenever a doctor approached. The examination confirmed new bruises, consistent with being forcibly restrained, alongside the fading ones I'd seen before. Each notation in the doctor's report felt like a fresh stab. My phone blew up with calls, friends, family, relief flooding their voices. I ignored them all. Only Ian mattered. Miller met us there. Chloe was being held without bail, kidnapping, child endangerment, abuse. Her friends faced similar charges. Then he dropped the bombshell. Your ex-wife already has a lawyer, he said, his expression troubled. She's claiming you were the abuser. That she rescued Ian. That you caused his injuries and she took him to protect him. Chloe was trying to flip the script, painting me as the villain. The fight for Ian was far from over, it was just moving to a new, more treacherous battlefield, the courtroom. Could I prove the truth against her manipulative lies and a well-funded legal team? That night, Ian slept in my bed, a tiny, trembling anchor in the storm of my emotions. Every time I shifted, he'd whimper and cling tighter. The social worker who visited the next morning, a kind woman with tired eyes, explained it was classic trauma response. She left pamphlets on child therapy, PTSD in preschoolers, support groups I couldn't imagine attending. My sister was a rock, cooking meals I couldn't taste, cleaning an already spotless apartment, her way of coping. Then the legal offensive began. A knock on the door, a smug process server, Chloe was filing for emergency custody, alleging I was the danger. Her lawyer, some high-powered shark specializing in complex family dynamics, read, high-conflict divorces, had spun a narrative that would make a fiction writer blush. I was the abusive, controlling ex, she was the brave, protective mother fleeing with her child. My lawyer, a decent guy but more Main Street than Wall Street, told me not to panic. The evidence is on our side, he kept saying. Easy for him to say. The following weeks were a grueling marathon of lawyer meetings, police interviews, and Ian's first tentative therapy sessions. He'd started talking, but only in whispers, only to me. He told me how the ladies made him sit in a reflection corner if he cried or asked for me, how they told him I didn't love him anymore, how all boys were potential toxins that needed purification. Each revelation was a fresh wave of rage and helplessness. Chloe's lawyer was a master manipulator. He filed motion after motion, demanding discovery, requesting continuances, burying us in paperwork. He painted EmpowerFlow not as a cult, but as a women's support network. He portrayed Chloe's actions not as kidnapping, but as a desperate flight to safety. Then came the temporary restraining order against me. Chloe claimed I'd threatened her during our last argument, that she lived in fear. The judge, likely erring on the side of caution, granted it. Suddenly, I was the one who looked aggressive, unstable. My lawyer said it was a common tactic. It still felt like a gut punch. The fact I'd driven to Millbrook, against Miller's direct order, was now being spun as reckless, unstable behavior, proof I couldn't be trusted around Ian. Ian's therapist, Dr. Ramirez, became our lifeline. She was patient, skilled, and meticulously documented every session, every drawing Ian made, mostly dark scribbles, stick figures with angry faces, a small boy separated from a larger one by thick black lines, every whispered fear. But therapy is slow, and the court dates loomed. The custody hearing was scheduled. My lawyer warned me, they're going to try and destroy your character. Then, a small ray of hope, Victoria Chen, the former EmpowerFlow member, called again. She'd seen the online smear campaign Chloe's remaining supporters were waging, because, of course, not all of them had been at the farmhouse. They were painting Chloe as a martyr, a victim of the patriarchy, and a vindictive ex. Victoria was disgusted. She offered to testify, to provide evidence, text messages, recordings of EmpowerFlow planning sessions, discussions about deprogramming boys and strategies for discrediting fathers in custody disputes. These messages were gold. They showed premeditation, a clear agenda. Chloe was an active participant in all of them. Armed with Victoria's explosive evidence, we headed into the restraining order hearing. But Chloe's team had their own tricks. Would the truth be enough to sway the judge, or was this just the first skirmish in a long, brutal war for Ian? The restraining order hearing felt like stepping into a surreal drama. Chloe arrived looking like a fragile flower, pale, downcast, dressed in something soft and unassuming. Her lawyer, a silver-tongued viper, launched into a monologue about my escalating aggression, my inability to accept the end of the relationship, painting me as a textbook example of a controlling ex. He even tried to use my desperate drive to Millbrook against me, twisting it into proof of my instability and disregard for authority. It was infuriating to sit there, muzzled by legal protocol, while he spun his web of lies. But then it was our turn. My lawyer, calm and methodical, presented the security footage from my sister's house, Chloe and her EmpowerFlow cronies, clear as day, breaking in. He then called Victoria Chen to the stand. Victoria was incredible. Poised, articulate, she laid out the EmpowerFlow Collective's ideology, their escalating rhetoric, their discussions about rescuing children from toxic masculine environments. She produced text message chains, even a short audio recording from a planning meeting where Chloe herself talked about needing to take drastic measures to ensure Ian's proper development. The courtroom was silent as the recording played, Chloe's confident, preachy voice filling the space. Chloe's lawyer tried to discredit Victoria, paint her as a disgruntled former member with an axe to grind, but Victoria held her ground, her testimony unshakable. The judge, a woman who had seen her fair share of messy family disputes, listened intently, her expression unreadable. In the end, she lifted the temporary restraining order against me, citing the clear evidence of Chloe's premeditated actions. However, Chloe's lawyer, ever the opportunist, managed to get a mutual no-contact order put in place, a small concession that still stung. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a significant momentum shift. The criminal trial against Chloe and her co-conspirators was scheduled to begin before the final custody hearing. My lawyer explained this was advantageous. A criminal conviction would heavily influence the family court's decision. Chloe's team, however, fought tooth and nail for separate, delayed trials, trying every legal maneuver to muddy the waters and drag things out. Meanwhile, the online smear campaign orchestrated by Chloe's remaining EmpowerFlow supporters went into overdrive. They launched hashtags, #BelieveMothers, #ProtectOurBoysFromToxicFathers. The irony was apparently lost on them. My name and photo were plastered across obscure blogs and fringe social media groups, accusing me of every imaginable sin. I was a monster, an abuser, a danger. People who knew me, even some distant relatives and casual acquaintances, started to look at me differently, a flicker of doubt in their eyes. The power of a well-crafted lie, amplified by the internet echo chamber, was terrifying. Ian was my sole focus. His therapy was slow but steady. Dr. Ramirez was working with him on expressing his feelings, on understanding that what happened wasn't his fault. He started drawing again, but this time, his pictures included a small figure, him, holding hands with a larger figure, me, with a bright yellow sun in the corner. Tiny steps, but they felt monumental. Then, one of the arrested EmpowerFlow members, Catherine Williams, the one whose credit card payment at the coffee shop had been a key lead, decided to flip. Faced with serious prison time, she agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. Her testimony would corroborate Victoria's, providing an inside look at the planning and execution of Ian's kidnapping and the group's abusive re-education plans. Chloe's carefully constructed victim narrative was beginning to crumble, not just in my eyes, but in the eyes of the law. The upcoming criminal trial felt like it could be the turning point. The criminal trial begins, and Chloe's facade starts to crack under the weight of damning testimony. But even if she's convicted, will it be enough to guarantee Ian's safety and secure my custody? The fight for my son's future hangs in the balance. The criminal trial was a draining, surreal circus. I had to testify, reliving every horrifying detail, finding Ian's injuries, the frantic search, the terror in his eyes when I finally held him at the farmhouse. Chloe sat at the defense table, a study in practiced victimhood, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while her lawyer tried to paint me as an unhinged, vengeful ex. But the medical reports, the photographs of Ian's bruises, the meticulous documentation from Dr. Ramirez, they spoke a truth louder than any courtroom theatrics. Victoria Chen was, once again, a star witness. Calmly and clearly, she detailed the EmpowerFlow Collective's descent from a seemingly supportive online community into a radicalized group convinced they were on a righteous mission. She presented more texts, more recordings, painting an undeniable picture of premeditation and a disturbing disregard for a child's well-being. Chloe's lawyer's attempts to rattle her failed spectacularly. Victoria was a woman who had seen the dark side of ideology and was determined to expose it. Then Catherine Williams took the stand. Her testimony was devastating for the defense. She described the re-education sessions, the methods they used to try and break Ian's spirit, to turn him against me. She admitted, voice trembling, that she'd realized too late how harmful their actions were, how Chloe had manipulated them all with her charismatic pronouncements and claims of higher purpose. She corroborated the physical abuse, admitting she'd witnessed Chloe roughly handling Ian when he resisted their teachings. The jury deliberated for less than a day. The verdict, guilty. On all counts. Kidnapping, child abuse, conspiracy. Chloe's mask of composure finally shattered. A strangled sob escaped her as the foreperson read the verdict. Her EmpowerFlow friends, also found guilty, looked stunned, as if they genuinely couldn't comprehend that their noble cause had landed them in such dire straits. Justice. It was a heavy, complex word. It wouldn't erase Ian's trauma, but it was a public acknowledgement of the truth. The sentencing came a few weeks later. Chloe received a significant prison term. Her accomplices got varying sentences based on their level of involvement. The judge, in her sentencing remarks, spoke scathingly about the dangers of extremist ideologies and the betrayal of a child's trust. With the criminal conviction secured, the final custody hearing felt almost like a formality, though Chloe's lawyer still tried to argue for supervised visitation, for a path to reunification. He claimed Chloe was a changed woman, that prison would rehabilitate her. Dr. Ramirez, Ian's therapist, presented her comprehensive report. It detailed Ian's PTSD, his separation anxiety, his deep-seated fear of his mother and her associates. She strongly recommended against any contact, stating it would be profoundly detrimental to his ongoing recovery. The family court judge, armed with the criminal conviction and Dr. Ramirez's expert testimony, didn't hesitate. Full legal and physical custody was awarded to me. Chloe's parental rights were effectively terminated, with a provision for professionally supervised therapeutic contact only if Ian, at a much older age and with his therapist's explicit recommendation, ever requested it. A snowball's chance in hell, basically. As the judge read her decision, I looked at Ian, who I'd brought to the courthouse. He'd insisted, wanting to see it be over. He was sitting quietly beside my sister in the gallery. When he heard the words, "full custody," a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He looked at me, and I knew, in that moment, that we could finally, truly, begin to heal. The legal battles were over. The door to that chapter of our lives had been slammed shut, locked, and the key thrown away. We won. But the scars of what Ian endured, and what Chloe became, ran deep. How do you rebuild a life after such a profound betrayal and trauma? Our journey towards healing, and the unexpected ways Ian found his strength, is coming up in the final part of our story. The years that followed the courtroom victories were about rebuilding, brick by painstaking brick. There was no magic wand, no instant, happily ever after. Ian's trauma was a shadow that lingered, sometimes faint, sometimes a heavy cloak. We moved to a new city 6 months after the final hearing, seeking a fresh start, anonymity, and a chance for Ian to just be a kid, without the whispers and stares. His new therapist, specializing in childhood trauma, was a godsend. Slowly, with patience and consistent love, Ian began to unfurl. He was resilient, more so than I could have ever hoped. The breathing exercises we'd clung to during the darkest days became a tool he used, and eventually, even taught to other kids at his new school who struggled with anxiety. He discovered a love for science, for building intricate Lego models, for a goofy rescue dog we named Buddy, who became his constant companion. The nightmares lessened, then mostly disappeared. He still asked about Chloe sometimes, usually late at night, his small voice filled with a confusion that broke my heart. Why did Mama Chloe hurt me? Didn't she love me? I answered him as honestly as I could, in age-appropriate ways, explaining that sometimes people get lost in bad ideas, that her sickness in thinking wasn't his fault, and that he was, and always would be, deeply loved and safe with me. I remarried a few years later. Sarah was a pediatric nurse I met through a mutual friend. She was kind, understanding, and, crucially, patient. She knew our history, and she embraced Ian with an open heart, never trying to replace Chloe, but offering a steady, gentle presence. Ian, cautious at first, gradually warmed to her. He saw in her the kindness and stability he'd been so cruelly denied. When Ian was 12, a letter arrived. Prison stationery. Chloe. She was eligible for parole, had completed all the programs, and wanted to see him. My blood ran cold. Legally, the custody order stood, but Ian was older now. He had a voice. I showed him the letter, prepared for any reaction. He read it, his expression unreadable, then set it down. "Can she make me?" he asked. "No, buddy," I assured him. "This is your decision." He thought about it for days. Talked to Sarah. Talked to his therapist. Then he told me, "I want to see her. Once. I need to ask her why." The meeting, heavily supervised at a neutral counseling center, was an hour Ian would never fully describe to me. He said she cried, apologized, talked about being brainwashed by EmpowerFlow and Serafina Moon, who, by then, had rebranded 3 times and was shilling crypto scams. But when Ian asked her, point blank, if she truly believed now that what she did was wrong, if she truly understood the harm, she hesitated. That hesitation, he said, told him everything he needed to know. He never asked to see her again. He said he got his answer. Some people, he realized, never truly change, they just learn to say the right words. High school Ian was a surprise. He joined the debate team. And he was good. Terrifyingly good. He used his understanding of manipulative rhetoric, of how ideologies can twist and distort, to deconstruct arguments with surgical precision. He graduated with honors and went to college, majoring in psychology, driven by a quiet determination to understand the human mind, perhaps to make sense of the senselessness he'd experienced. The dinosaur t-shirt, the one he'd worn that fateful day, stayed in the back of his closet for years. The day he left for college, he pulled it out, held it for a moment, then tossed it into a donation box. "Don't need this anymore, Dad," he said, a small smile on his face. "I know who I am now." He became Dr. Ian. A clinical psychologist specializing in childhood trauma and the impact of cults and extremist groups on families. He dedicated his life to helping kids like him, kids whose innocence had been stolen by adult ideologies. He testified in court sometimes, his personal history lending a profound, unshakable credibility to his professional expertise. Chloe faded into a footnote, a cautionary tale. She was released, tried to rebrand herself online as a survivor of a flawed justice system, but the internet had moved on. Her EmpowerFlow was a forgotten hashtag. Looking back, the journey was brutal. But through it all, Ian didn't just survive, he thrived. He built a life filled with purpose, love, and an incredible capacity for empathy. He proved that the re-education his mother and her cult had tried to force on him had failed spectacularly. He became an extraordinary man, not by their twisted definition, but by his own, kind, intelligent, resilient, and deeply compassionate. The scars were there, no doubt, but they weren't just marks of pain, they were testament to his strength, to our strength, and to the enduring power of a father's protective love against a tide of manipulation and madness. The breathing exercises became a quiet ritual for us, a reminder not of trauma, but of how far we'd come, how much we'd overcome, together. Ian's journey from a traumatized child to a renowned psychologist is a testament to resilience. But what became of Chloe after her release? And how did the lessons learned from this nightmare shape our family for generations to come? Stick around for a final reflection on healing and hope. This implies a very short epilogue/final thoughts segment for the video.